I'm about to be live. I'm going to also start recording too. Okay, yep, I'm live. Give me just a sec to pause this so it's not. Start playing. I'm pretty sure every single one of my YouTube videos has this really, really awkward first minute where I'm waiting for it for the YouTube video to pop up live. Okay, there we go. Awesome. Well,
it's all good.
Thanks for joining me, Ben. I appreciate you jumping on. I'm really excited to interview you. We'll start with just letting you introduce yourself. I'd prefer you do it because if I intro you, I'm just going to say all the weird, silly things about you. Like the greatest troll the internet. Well, no, you're the second greatest troll.
Yeah. I've always got to be second.
Yeah.
At least when I'm talking to you, I'll be the second. You know?
Yeah. Only when you're talking to me. Otherwise, I'm sure you're the best. But you're also really great for so many other things. And what I actually love about that though is you are so silly and troll-like on Facebook, but then if you have a conversation with like Ben is like the sweetest human being you've ever met. So anyways, I'm excited to talk more about what you're doing in Wolf Den. So why don't you just go over just a little bit of your background and then we'll jump into stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and keep it brief, but essentially what I'm doing in the Wolf Den with the Guardians specifically right now is something that we're calling directions for acting like a gray wolf. And that piece is kind of a play on Nick's, directions for acting like an adult, some of the Nick Smith's trainings that he shared with us, which have been amazing. But to back up, where this stuff is all coming from is from years of study with Zen Wellness. So Zen Wellness is a great organization. They're based in Phoenix, Arizona. Jason Campbell and Mike Leone are the founders. And Jason was actually my first business mentor, 100 years ago. And I think 2009 is when I started with him. Yeah. So I had a brick and mortar yoga and personal training studio. I was like dying, in the first 6 months because I had no business experience. And anyway, found him, thankfully, started working with him, turned the studio around, started to really develop some skills on like, how do I run this business, but from more of like a Zen aspect. Like he would talk about everything in business in terms of the 5 elements and things like that. And so it wasn't like, hey, here's like my spiritual and personal development path, and here's my business. It was like one thing, and both were evolving together. I was evolving, the business was evolving, and so I began to also study the healing arts with Zen Wellness. So I was getting business coaching, but then I was going through their, medical qigong and just learning that, applying it. Then I started teaching that as well. And so over the years, both the business training and the kind of personal development training have informed so many aspects of, my life and family and how I coach and consult my clients. And so, fast forward to a couple months ago, I was, just chatting with Nick and the team and looking at, hey, how can I contribute here in a meaningful way? And I just said, do you think it would be helpful to take some of the Nick Smith's principles and, weave in some of the Zen Wellness pieces so people can kind of understand more of like, well, how do I put all this stuff, the Zen, in with like these other teachings? And, so that was the original idea. But as I started to teach it over these last several weeks, people were really asking for like, well, hey, can we have some things where we can like apply this, like some simple practices?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what it evolved into was, helping them understand what are these 5 elements that, that we're hearing about and like, how can these be useful? And so, we've gotten into like, which element is what kind of personality and, what kind of like breathing or visualization and stuff can you do to, to try and manage your energy. Right. because one of the most profound things for me in studying with different teachers is that the teachers that have been most helpful to me on the healing arts side have always had this kind of fundamental view that the shape or condition of our own personal energy determines how we experience our life. And so it's like, if you can experience that, I mean, it sounds cool in theory, but when you get it because you're practicing now and kind of seeing like, oh wow, if I do a certain kind of breathing, like I feel different, I see things differently, I maybe have different thoughts. And so, again, the idea behind sharing this with, the guardians so far is just to give people some tools that can help them kind of manage the stresses of the ever-changing world, essentially.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm curious. I'm actually going to be interviewing also Jason and Mike, so that'll be great. And I had no clue you've known Jason since 2009, but I did see the photo of you with them. What is like 2011? I was like, what?
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
But what, like, okay, just going back a bit, how did you get into, because I know you started business and stuff, but what got you intrigued by like this idea and concept and lifestyle of Zen wellness?
Yeah, so I mean, it really was. So I started, this part of my journey with yoga. And I found a tremendous yoga mentor, studied with him for several years, flew all over the country and the world, like doing his different trainings. And that was kind of like the beginning, I would say, of like that aspect of my personal and spiritual development, if you will.
Was that early 2000s?
That was, I was like 28, which was like 15 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah. So, early 2000s. And so, after practicing for a couple of years and developing a meditation practice and working at a yoga and personal training studio, I kind of was out of alignment with the owner there and wasn't resonating anymore. So it's like, well, what am I going to do? And, ended up opening the business, then started working with Jason on the business side. And I went out to Arizona for a 2-day Zen business boot camp is what he was calling it at the time. And, he was like, well, why don't you stay for the next 2 days and try the Zen wellness stuff? I was like, okay, cool. Like I'll try it. And, I had done tons of yoga and working out and all that stuff, but it was very, very different, like very subtle. I was like, kind of lost. I'm like, what the hell am I doing with my hands? And I feel really, it was like totally awkward, like as awkward as you could be. But, I was like, okay, and kept going to those like 2-day trainings, and then, started going to 5-day trainings and that stuff, and just kind of gradually took another step down the study path, if you will. And, the more I practiced the Zen side of things, and I was still practicing yoga, I then started to look at like, well, how do these things kind of fit together, and then I started weaving some of the like meridian stuff and Chinese medicine into my yoga classes, which was, a fun experiment. But that's a long-winded answer to your how did I get started question.
Well, it's interesting because you started yoga. I mean, I guess it wasn't that long ago, but it feels to me like, because learning, I'm obviously in Jason's class with you that we do during the weekend. The way that Jason teaches, you can tell like holds like the roots of what this Zen wellness and yoga and the history of it is. And the reason I find that so interesting is I've been doing yoga for like 6 years now, on and off. And depending upon who you're learning from, yoga has definitely in a lot of ways become this like overly fitness. It's not yoga, like once you actually start to learn, and I can't say I fully understand it myself. I'm definitely still learning, but once you start to grasp like the roots and what yoga really came from and what it really is, most people aren't actually doing yoga. So it's just interesting to talk to someone who's started a long time ago, and not only that, but like is actually learning from people who understand where it came from.
Yeah, and on the yoga side, it was really interesting because first real mentor that I had there was also way into like traditional yoga, meditation, energetics. So like we would do like prescriptive yoga practices. It was like,
Mhm.
okay, if you're dealing with anxiety and this and that and the other, it's more upward moving energy, so we're going to do more forward bends and twisting type movements to try and help you
Uh,
ground. So I had already been introduced to this idea of like yoga as medicine, if you will.
right.
And so
Mm.
it was super cool to come over to the Zen wellness stuff and go,
Yeah.
oh wow, like this exists and it's just a different movement paradigm, and there are some different elemental names and stuff, but it's all kind of similar in so many ways. It was really cool to see that.
Yeah. Well, how do we even, and I'm obviously going to let you do this because I have no clue, to explain like what this deeper side. So we have yoga, but now this whole like
Yeah.
qigong and breathing and all this other stuff. How do we explain that to people who've never even heard of the concept?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I think the easy way to think about energy, at least initially, is that it's emotion, right?
Mhm.
Emotion is energy in motion. So if you can agree with us that, oh yeah, like emotion is a real thing, then you can think about like, okay, think about a time where you felt really anxious. Okay, well, not the greatest feeling in the world, right? Like that kind of like pensiveness and probably a lot of movement like in your head, right? Like a lot of thoughts. So it's like if you think about that, it's like, oh well, anxiety is kind of like this upward sensation, like upward moving sensation. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So if I can agree, or if we can agree that something like anxiety has this kind of like fast movement and it feels kind of like up in our body, then it might make sense, if I want to feel the opposite of that, to try and do some things that would maybe bring my awareness into my abdomen, as an example.
Mm.
Right. So I think that's the key. It's like trying to help people take what they've already experienced and now see it through this like other lens of energetics versus just purely emotion, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it does require, I would say, going into it, and you were saying this earlier, it's so weird when you first try it out.
Yeah.
Like I remember the first class of Jason's I took, I was like, what are we doing? This is, but I mean, at that point, like I kind of had already known like life is so much more energy than we can see with our eyes.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it definitely does require you to, just like I said, like see things a bit differently than just what you can like physically see.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
And I think that's, it's like um one of the challenges is, I think it requires a certain level of open-mindedness, right? But at the same time, and I say this often if I'm in a teaching kind of atmosphere, it's like, look, I'm not here to get you to believe me or to like blindly follow what I'm saying. And this is an appealing thing about Jason and Mike as well, is like, here's the tool, try it out and
Mhm.
see what you experience. Don't try and take my word for it or believe in it because you believe in me. It's like, just try it out for
Mhm.
long enough to verify for yourself whether it's something you want to continue to utilize and you see some usefulness to it, or you don't. And either way, it's fine, right? It's not
Right.
like, no, my path up the mountain is better than yours. It's like, whatever path up the mountain you want to take is fine. Just make sure you're taking a path up the mountain and you're not just settling in at, at the current um whatever the current place that you're at.
Yeah. So are you saying essentially, just so I can best understand, like the path up the mountain is like people's ability to like ascend, to grow, to get somewhere, I don't even want to say further, but maybe even like deeper in their life and their purpose.
Yeah. So here's maybe something that could be useful. So for me, and again, I'm not expecting anyone else to have my beliefs or to take this on,
Yeah.
but when I look at like, how am I going to live a life that I'm really content with? Like, what are the components of that? Well, a big one for me is like, I want to be able to handle change that I'm not expecting, right?
Mm,
It's super easy for us to handle the change that we want, right? Like,
mhm.
whatever. Oh, my crypto portfolio 10x. Woohoo. Yeah, I'm loving life. But what about the change that we don't want? Oh, crypto's in a bear market. Like, oh, my life is over. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not interested in that roller coaster experience. And so things are going to change. Our bodies are going to change. Our relationships are going to change. Our thoughts are going to change. So if we as humans, at least in my perspective, want to have like peace and joy and fulfillment and connection and the things that I think are probably important to a lot of us, I think it requires us having certain tools to understand, like, well, how do I deal with my changing emotions and my changing physical body? And and to me, that's where some of these like Zen tools or yoga really come into play, because I can use them proactively. I can also use them reactively if I need to, but I
Yeah.
can establish, habits and behaviors that, instead of, doing this all the time, up and down and up and down and up and down, it might be like, all right, smaller peaks and valleys. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to flatline, right? Like, I don't think anyone's looking
Right.
for oh, I
Because you're
want
dead.
everything. Yeah, exactly. We may as well be dead. But maybe like a little less on the extremes,
Yeah.
that
Totally.
could be nice, and a little easier to kind of manage, and to also help others, because if we're in this roller coaster, how the hell are we going to step into our unique gifts and really like bless other people with what we're here to do?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point of this all that is easily to overlook and miss. I mean, especially in a crypto community, like with the amount of volatility that comes with crypto,
Mhm.
if the only thing we really have control over is our response, this is where this becomes so vitally important. And I mean, me personally, I'm not super dedicated and into like understanding the technical sides of crypto. That's just never been my thing.
Mhm.
But I can see with the amount of time and experience I have had just being in the vicinity of it that without this, you kind of are just like a fish drowning with like the waves are just going to take you and you have really no way of managing it. And something that Jason says all the time that continues to stick with me is I think it's something along the lines of like becoming off center is what creates the center. Like
Yeah.
if everything's black, nothing's black, like you need some level of contrast. And so learning these Zen principles within the setting of the classes is one thing, but then to go take it into your life is a totally other ordeal.
Yeah, and that teaching of, there's no center without off center, it's essentially yin and yang in different words, right?
Mm,
Like,
mm,
there's no masculine without the feminine. And
mm,
I think it's easy to go like, oh yeah, I get the concept of yin yang, but when
right.
you really start to dig into the layers of it, it's like, and apply it to your life, it's amazingly powerful. Like, there's a tremendous simplicity to it. Like, they're opposites, but they also, one doesn't exist without the other, so there's that codependence. And then uh like, as an example, something can become so cold it's hot,
Yeah.
so they can transform, so there's all these phases and relationships between yin and yang. And I think part of the cool aspect of studying these things is like, oh, well, how can I take this and see it in my relationship? Like, if I always want my marriage to be smooth and content, and there's never an argument, it's like, well, that might be fine. I'm not saying you have to have like raging fights. We don't, my wife and I don't fight,
Yeah.
but there's disagreements and there can be tension. And I think that's like necessary and healthy, right? Because it's like, without the tension, then how could you experience the lack of tension?
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a super important principle and lesson.
I find the yin and yang, the layers of it so fascinating. It's something I've just been recently like really diving into within like the masculine, feminine, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you do, you may not be able to answer this, but do you have any like, and it could be anything, like real life examples of where you've seen like understanding the layers of depth of this impacting, like whether it's your business, personal life, anything that you could share?
Oh yeah, I mean, 100%. So, I've, as you have, I've been in the depths of the like online business world for 5+ years now. And I think we see extremes of yang, like masculine, very like aggressive type of energy. And I do think it's shifting. So there's that. But for a while, it was very like yang, masculine dominant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what that creates is it's just like an unhealthy balance. And where I saw that unhealthy balance play out is a lot of people going through these coaching and consulting programs and not being a great fit for them, but there was like an aggressive sales process. And so now you have a large community of people who have had a bad experience, especially in like the high ticket space that we're familiar with. And so now there's like the fallout of that is that people are more skeptical, they're less trusting, so it's like there's more fear, which is like that's the yin piece. So it was so much yang that it created like the yin outcome. And so I think what we're seeing, at least what I'm starting to see in my circles, is there's still a lot of that yang energy, but it's starting to shift a little bit more towards the yin, where there's like more receptivity, sometimes a little softer approach depending on the company, more like more groundedness and stability and those kinds of things. So you can see, just like taking the space as an example, like the phases, and how if there's an extreme on one side, that the other, it's going to swing the other way. It might not go fully to the opposite extreme, but you're going to see a movement towards the other direction. And so where that can be useful is like if we're observing patterns and things like that. I mean, in the crypto market, bull market, yang, right? Guess what's on the other side of that? Bear market, very yin. Yeah. It's like sluggish, and people are unhappy and fearful, and so you can see it in anything. And I think again, that's the beautiful thing about just absorbing some of the yin yang and 5 elements and some of these fundamental principles, is that you can start to use it as a filter for yourself and even a decision-making tool to help you feel like more confident and clear in whatever decisions you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like crypto being one of the most volatile things I've at least seen in my life, this could be the most challenging yet most useful principle to bring in, because like I don't necessarily think that the logistical side of crypto being so volatile is ever going to necessarily change. But I mean, it sounds too like what you were saying earlier, not as many like high peaks and low valleys, but bringing a little bit more of the balance. Because the way I've actually seen it in online marketing, to what you're speaking about with the intense yang coming to the yin, is I shouldn't say most people, but a good majority of people like that they're so heavy into the grind piece of it that they just get so far to burnout that it's the constant all or nothing, like you're one or the other. But there's really no in between. So maybe you could talk a little bit about like how you are. I mean, I know there's complexity and there's layers and there's a lot of depth within what it is you're teaching inside of Wolf Den, but maybe just shining a little bit of a light, whether it's like on a business sense or crypto sense, of how people are approaching things differently. Like, what does that look like? And I know you do this in your business too, in coaching, business, online marketing. So I'm just curious to see, because I mean, even for myself, because of that, I just stepped away a lot from online marketing because I was so just like, I don't even want to be around it necessarily. So I'm also guilty of coming to that other side where I was like, no, thank you. I just don't want to do this anymore. But it's cool to hear that there are people like you who aren't just going to walk away and be like, no, I don't want to do this anymore, but you're actually learning about the necessary changes. And I really respect that. But what have you seen shift, whether that's in your business or even in like some of these people in Wolfden who've been coming into these teachings?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question. And one, like, I don't blame people for leaving the online space or stepping away. Because like, I'll tell you, there are plenty of days where I'm like, man, I'll try and keep it clean and like, F it, I don't want to deal with online business owners anymore. I'm just going to go like brick and mortar. And, obviously like there's challenges and problems everywhere. So that's just my emotion kind of running through me. But so there's that voice at times in my head for sure. But I also like when I'm can be grounded and clear, I say, okay, you know what? One, things are changing. Like I see more owners that like just truly care. And not that they just care to make more money or whatever. They actually want to be in integrity and deliver on, whatever it is that they're promising they can deliver on. So I'm seeing more of that. And the reason I know that is because one of the things that we help with in my business is client experience. And so owners often come to me and they say, like, this is keeping me awake at night. I'm worried that what we're selling is maybe not matching the support needed in order for clients to get the outcomes that we're promising.
Yeah.
And that's happening, more and more. And there's even proactivity now. Like when we first started this offer that we have, it was very reactive, like everything's breaking and everything's on fire. Can you help us? So that's not a lot of fun. But now I'm seeing even more proactivity around, hey, we're growing. Everything's okay right now, but we want to have you guys look at this and make sure that as we grow, like we're not just breaking everything. So I'm seeing that mentality shift. And what that does for me is it just is like, hey, Ben, you have this opportunity to stay in this space and help more people who want to operate in integrity. And like, you can help facilitate part of that, so that to me feels like a gift in a way of like, oh, wow, I can actually, in some small way, I can potentially help the space as a whole keep moving in that direction of more integrity, like more stability, those kinds of things.
I wouldn't say small. I would say that's like one of the biggest things to be done in the industry. And oh God, I'm losing my train of thought. But I think what it was around like, you actually posted about it. It was either yesterday or the day before. And it's kind of what I think I've heard Nick teach it, which is like, we always are celebrating people for getting out of debt, for losing a lot of weight, but we're never celebrating the person who never gained a bunch of weight or never gotten a lot of debt. And so that proactivity, it's so easy to like overlook and forget that. I think what you said in your post was, it's easier to get fit than to stay fit. It's easier to fix a broken business than it is to maintain a healthy business.
Yeah. So it's, I was speaking to like my own health journey this year, because like, over the last decade, just I gained weight and it's like, what to do, but you start, slipping in your habits and then it piles up. Like, I'm sure we've all experienced that in different ways. And, to me, it's like, this year has been very unsexy, but I've got, in terms of like my own personal health, but I've been super consistent in all aspects. And it was just a reminder to me of like, hey, consistency is important. And it's like, we know this, but I think when we experience it in different areas of our life, it can be such a powerful reminder and gives us the opportunity to go like, where am I not being consistent? And also wishing for different outcomes,
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, I mean, it's okay to want different outcomes, but I think then the ownership piece is like, well, what are the actions I'm taking moment to moment, day to day, week to week? Are they actually leading me toward the thing that I say that I want, or are they leading me away from it?
Right.
So, we can get into a whole thing about like, do we feel like we deserve certain things, and, how our behaviors are informing those moment to moment decisions. But yeah, it's not sexy to do the maintenance thing, like to reach a certain level of health or peak health and just stay there. Like there,
For
there's
sure.
no dopamine in that, right?
No,
But
it's so
yeah,
funny. I was like just thinking the other day, I was like, it really, after I read your post, I was like, it really is such a high mentally to need to get fit again. And I've seen that in my life so many times. I think that's probably the biggest area we see it, or at least I've seen it, is this like mass volatility, because there's such a huge dopamine kick in getting fit again, as opposed to staying fit.
yeah. Well, and I think too, just to bring it back to the Zen stuff for a minute, I think that's where, this kind of Zen practice can be super helpful, because look, as long as we're alive, we're probably going to be seeking dopamine. I'm not going to suggest otherwise, but I think what having these kinds of tools, Zen tools, in my experience, it allows you to be on less of a dopamine search,
Mm,
like you're still going to do it, but if you're meditating regularly, if you know how to, control your breath or breathe in certain ways to shape your energy, like you're not just going to lean into looking at the crypto chart all the time. And it's going to,
right.
there's a different level that you operate at, to where you will likely find yourself needing less of that, like, the dopamine charge all the time. You're still
Right.
going to seek it, but it kind of takes it down a few notches, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that acceptance piece of us like wanting dopamine is huge, because I'm speaking for myself. It's been easy for me to be like, oh, like I look at all the ways I search for dopamine and then almost feel like guilt about it, but to
Yeah.
recognize that that's normal. But what are the ways that we can be in like a sustainability place?
Yeah.
Is big. So within I know this has just recently started, like you're 4 weeks in, you said, to doing this in the Wolf Den.
Yep. Yeah, we're wrapping up this session on Thursday. Actually, Jason's gonna join me and
Oh, fun.
share some of his wisdom. But yeah, we'll do it again as like a new cohort of Guardians comes in, but it's
Okay.
basically it's a 5-week series that we're doing.
Oh, okay. So it's like, I didn't realize this. So it's like it's not like Jason's where you just pop, it's like a scheduled out, like you have things you're learning and
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
exactly. Essentially like how this one shaped out is, we went through like some of the fundamentals of yin yang, but then we really focused in on the 5 elements,
Mm,
and understanding like what is each element, like what are the qualities that belong to each element, and like what is the
mm.
emotion, and also like what can I practice if I'm experiencing like a lot of anger, which is wood energy. So not
Wow.
only was it like some information about understanding each of the elements, but it's also like, hey, here's a simple breathing practice you can do, try it out, see if it works for you, and then you have a tool in your toolbox.
I might have to join the next cohort. I'm very interested. You're
Yeah.
telling me. I actually, the 5 elements piece, that's something I've never really gotten deep into. I mean, I hear Jason talk about them. I hear Mike talk about
Mhm.
them. I don't really get it. That is, I guess that's
Yeah.
one piece of it that I understand what the 5 elements are, but I don't necessarily see the way that they are like connected to just like the
Yeah.
little nuances of life. Like, can you give just a tiny overview of that, like these 5 elements and how
Yeah.
we're seeing the connections?
Yeah. I think the simplest way, or one of the simple ways, is to think about the seasons. And so the 5 elements are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water.
Mhm.
And I listed them in the order of what's called the generating or supporting cycle. So wood feeds fire, right? Fire creates earth or ash,
Mhm.
right? Out of earth comes metal. That's where we get metal from. And then you can think of water condensing on metal, or you can think of metal as a container that holds water and supports water.
Okay.
Either one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So then if we go into seasons, it's like, okay, well, springtime is wood energy. Okay, well, why? Well, think about a tree. It's growing up and out, right? And springtime, like that's the energy. It's up and out, it's expanding, right? Then we get to they break summer into two seasons. Okay. So it's early summer and it's late summer. Early summer is the fire element. So in fire element, we start to see this like the budding and the flowering happening, right? It's also the year is 8 to 33 in your life. That's your fire season. Whereas 0 to 8 is the wood phase of your life, right? Like lots of growth, lots of expansion. And then in fire, like you continue to develop, but you're starting to like step into your own and like, who am I as a person? You're getting clearer on that. That's like, you're burning brightly for the most part, unless, obviously people deal with illnesses and stuff that's kind of out of the norm. Then we move into late summer, which is earth energy. Okay. So it's also 33 to 58 or 57. So earth is like more stable. It's where we start to harvest more, right? Like we're heading towards fall, but it's that late summer harvesting time. Up here in the Northeast, it's like corn and strawberries and, and stuff like that. We start to see some apples, coming to fruit. And then in life, it's like that 33 to 57, those tend to be more stable years for us, like on the whole. Most people, if they're going to start a family, that's when it's really going to start to form. Master Leone talks about that's a great time to really start to build your sanctuary or like your lifetime home,
Wow.
It doesn't mean like you can never move, once you're in the earth phase, but you're growing your roots essentially to prepare for the next phases.
Wow.
And I know I'm like giving a lot here, but we'll keep
this
moving.
is great. I love it.
So then we move into metal, which is the fall season. And so a cool way to think about the metal element is like the axe, so we're cutting away, the leaves are falling, right? We're cutting away. So that it's a good time of year to like let go of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And in life, it's like the 58 to 82 phase. Again, good time to let go of things that aren't serving us, because more and more we're preparing for death and all of eternity, as Master Leone would say, right? And then the last element is water, which is wintertime. And so, winter, obviously, if you're in like Arizona, not so much, but where there are seasons, it's like a time of death and transformation. And it's not like a negative thing. It's actually something required so that when spring comes around, there's fresh soil for us again to have that expansive kind of energy available to us. And it's, in terms of years, it's, 83 to 108, basically.
Wow.
So in that phase of life, if we make it to that phase, it's really all about like doing the internal work to prepare ourselves to move on to whatever is next after we leave this body.
Yeah. Wow. It's okay. I have heard a little bit of that from Jason and Mike, and it's always so fascinating to me to think like life is so much bigger and deeper than I realize. I mean, I'm kind of young when I hear that. I think that's what I get every time I hear that. I'm like, damn it. I'm in one of the still the earlier phases. I'm in that fire phase. Would you say like within each of them, like I mean, we still always have seasons, right? Like that's always going to be happening around us. Would you say that that's like the dominant, like when you're in that age range, that's like your dominant season, but you're still experiencing all the other ones within it, like that yin and yang part? Yes.
Well, yeah. So I'll go down the rabbit hole a little bit. I'll try and do it simply, but within each of the 25-year phases. So from 8 to 32, which is your fire phase, from 33 to 57, which is your earth phase, from 58 to 82 metal, and then 83 to 108. Within each of those is a 5-year phase. So, and it starts, guess what? It starts when you hit 33, you start a 5-year wood phase.
Wow.
within each of those,
Wow.
there's a 1 year. So, 33 is wood of earth, right? The 1 year
Wow.
is wood, the 5 year is wood, the 25 year is earth.
Do you
So
track these personally?
I actually I do pay attention to it. Like I'll give an
Okay.
example. 42 for me was a water year. So
Mhm.
I was just cognizant of it, and I said, oh, okay, there might be some things that transform or things I let go of, because it's in a way it's symbolic of death. So okay, so I'm open to it. And as the year went on, um, made like massive changes in my business. The first half of this year, I worked like 5 hours a week. I took the whole month of February
Yeah.
off. Like it was very purposeful, and I wasn't doing it just because it was a water year,
Yeah.
but I was aware of that, and I was also aware of like what do I feel intuitively like I need right now going into this next phase, which
Mhm.
starts at 43. And it's probably the most powerful experience I've had when I've kind of looked back at like what was the energetic quality of that year. Okay, it was water for me. Business completely shifted in so many ways. My health obviously has been a big focus and has shifted tremendously in the right direction this year. And almost to the day, like I turned 43 in July, almost to the day, like there was just this burst of energy of like, I, I'm ready to create. And I
Wow.
was like, I need to start having, and that's where this whole thing with the Wolf Den came out of. It was like, I'm just going to have conversations with people in my network because like, I'm ready to like build stuff.
So cool.
Yeah. And so, again, I'm not saying this so people just like blindly believe it, but
No,
this
for
was like
sure.
for me the most like real experience of
Mm.
understanding like where I am in terms of the energetic phases, and how am I making some decisions based on that, not purely based on that, but with that in mind. And it's just really cool to be able to look through that lens and go, wow, like this has been a really smooth transition, and the changes that I've made have really played out well, and those kinds of things.
I think what it's cool about it is it kind of brings full circle back to the beginning of the conversation where you said like it requires some open-mindedness. Like these things,
Mhm.
it's not necessarily always like very linear. So you have to be able to see life through something past like what you physically just know has been true. At least that's how it feels for me.
Mhm.
And I'm definitely very curious to look at that and the congruencies with my own life. So the 5 years, are they the same in each, like they repeat in each cycle, like that 5 year frame?
Yeah, so that it goes, first 5 years of a phase is wood, second 5 years is fire, then
Okay.
it's earth, then it's metal. It's always that
Wow.
generating cycle in there. Yep.
Really cool. Really, really cool. So I think and I want to be cognizant of your time, Ben. Just to wrap up, I mean, there's two places that you're really doing this. And so I want to highlight that, like, you're really incorporating this into the online business world, which I think is extremely important and necessary just with my time and experience there, but also into the Wolf Den, which it's cool to see how the Wolf Den has evolved over time, starting out with it being like mostly a crypto environment where we got very gung-ho on crypto stuff in the bull market. All of us now are like, okay, it's time to learn about real life stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, also teaching this in the Wolf Den, and this is for the Guardian tier. That's correct.
Yeah, right now it's for Guardians. And then, of course, there's the Gray Wolf Summit, which
Okay.
will be coming up in the fall. I mean, I'm not going to be teaching at the Gray Wolf Summit, but I imagine Jason and Master Leone will be there, and then there is like Wolf Zen, which is currently being built, and those things. So I know for the Wolf Den community, there's going to be ample opportunities to, even just to dabble into like, well, what are some of these Zen teachings, and to get a
Mhm.
feel for it. And then, there are things that like the Master's Apprentice program and things like that Zen Wellness and the Wolf Den are partnering up on. That is like, okay, I actually want to walk down the path and study with Master Campbell and Master Leon, with Jason
I
and
think that's a bit more intense, The Apprentice.
yeah, yep, for sure.
Sounds like it, at least in my experience with Mike, and I'll let him talk more about it, but you've gone through it. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've lived, you've survived. So it's safe.
Yeah, I got my, silver coin so far. I haven't gotten the gold coin yet, but yeah, I've done over 1,000 hours of study with those guys, and it's fantastic on so many levels. But just to be able to be around Jason and Mike, and just kind of see like how they navigate the world, and they're just like, they're real, and you're never going to get any bullshit from them, which I so appreciate. And it's cool how you can see, wow, you can like be walking your spiritual path, but also like be doing really well in the world, by whatever standards you want to call that. But they're thriving in all these different areas, and it's just cool to have a couple of good, grounded, high integrity examples, of that.
Yeah, high integrity for sure. Like people who definitely have lived this work well before they are teaching it, which is something to be said for that. So
yeah, they didn't get the weekend certification.
No, definitely not. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you jumping on to talk about this stuff. I have learned a lot. So thank you for taking all of my questions and diving into them really deeply. I once again, like I said, I think it's cool to getting to see life in a totally different lens than just this, like what's happening around us, to go a bit further and like actually explore the energy, the seasons, and once again, like the open-mindedness, being willing to learn, and then again from there to teach. So yeah, great work that you're doing in the world, Ben. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah. And so obviously people can find you if they are in the Guardian tier, in the Wolf Den, like there's all of those details. But if I want to also be able to plug the details of, like, I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs, so like online business owners, if they're in need of your services, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So simplest thing is just to go to ethicalscaling.com. That's our website. You can probably find me on Facebook too, Ben McLellan. But yeah,
just look for the guy who's trolling everyone.
Exactly. You'll be like, that's that guy, really? Yeah, it's me. I'm a big time troll. It's part of my fun. So
yeah, it is fun. It's fun to see both sides. Much appreciated. Yeah, and I'll make sure I put those in the details. But yeah, thank you again, Ben. This was great.